As we get closer to Election Day, we have to look at the best case scenario for Donald Trump. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back again with a new video, and I hope everyone is having a great day. I'm certainly having a great day myself. And before we get into it, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell. Also consider joining the channel today. Again, these are all great ways to support the daily content, but enough of the promotional stuff. Let's get into it because we have to look at the current state of the race and what could very well be the best case scenario for Donald Trump next Tuesday. Now, I want to be clear that this is not an official prediction. I am not saying that this map will for sure happen, and no one should expect this on election night. But with how bad things have gotten for Democrats the past month or so, it is a good time to look at what would the best case scenario for Trump really be. Like, if everything goes perfectly for him the next week, if the stars align, what would the electoral map look like next Tuesday? Now, in a best case scenario, I would say Trump would win the popular vote by like 3 to 4 points. You go to the RCP average right now, except for a single pollster, Morning Compost, every other pollster has the race either Harris +1 through Trump +3. That's the current consensus. So the average right now is Trump +0.4. So you would argue, okay, right now the popular vote's looking like Harris +1, a tied popular vote, maybe Trump +1, maybe Trump +2. In a best case scenario, looking at these polls, I really believe Trump +3, Trump +4, while very unlikely, would be the best case scenario for Trump right now. This is if the stars align, everything goes perfectly for him the next week, and Harris just falls off the map. I'm not saying that's going to be the final popular vote. That's just, I really believe that's the best case scenario for Trump in the next week. It ends up being Trump +3, maybe Trump +4, somewhere in that range. You could argue maybe Trump +2, but fine. Let's just say Trump +2 through Trump +4 is the best case scenario in the popular vote. Now, with that in mind, let's get into it. And we'll start with the for sure, no matter what you do, safe Democrat states. These are states that, without a question, would still be safe Democrats. States like California, Washington, Hawaii, they might shift to the right, especially Hawaii. I just don't think it's enough to get it within 10 points. States like California, it's still going to be like D +20. In a best case scenario for Trump, it's still like D +20. Maybe it could be within 20 points, maybe. More than likely, though, it's probably not going to happen. States like Illinois would still be safe, though it would be borderline. I still think Illinois, it's too stagnant to really shift that Republican. Is it possible? Maybe, but it's very unlikely. States like Maryland, D.C., Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, there's no question about it that these states, no matter what you do, they would be safe Democrat no matter what. Now, there are 3 other states that I would say more than likely they would be safe Democrat. That, of course, is Colorado, Delaware, and New York. Now, I know with New York, there's going to be a big shift in New York no matter what happens. And in the best case scenario, you could argue maybe it could be within 10 points. Maybe. I just find it very unlikely right now because you're talking about a 15-point shift in New York. Is it possible? I guess, but I have questions about New York. States like Colorado, they're shifting heavy to the left. Like, I don't care what the early voting is showing out of Colorado. There are so many Democrats that have moved there from, say, Texas or Florida. I just don't see how Colorado is within 10 points. I think that state is just gone for Republicans. Though it could shift right from 2020, I don't think it's enough to make it within 10. I mean, back in 2020, Biden won Colorado by roughly 14 points. And ever since then, more and more Democrats have been moving to Colorado, and they've been making the state more and more Democrat. Now, I know the early voting looks pretty good for Republicans there, but I don't know. I have doubts about Colorado being within 10, even in a best case scenario, but I guess it's possible. But for now, we're just going to say it's going to be safe. But either way, that's it for Democrats. These are the only safe Democrat states they're going to get. Now, obviously, they will win some other states, but that's it for states that will be Democrat by over 10 points. That's it. Now, for Republicans, they have a lot of safe states. Utah, Alaska, Idaho, all these states are obviously Republican, even in a, a worst case scenario for Trump. More than likely, he's going to win all these states by at least 10 points. Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, I highly doubt that's going to be within 10 anyways. But in a best case scenario, it's probably Trump plus 14, plus 15, which is just crazy to think about, but that's what the numbers are suggesting right now. Even in not a best case scenario, there's a chance it's like Trump plus 15 in a best case scenario. States like Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, the Deep South, all these states, they'd be safe Republican. In a best case scenario, these states are voting Republican no matter what, and I would include Florida, and of course Maine second. Yeah, Republicans are 219, Democrats are 169. Now, let's just get rid of the states that they're going to be within 10 points technically, but they're borderline safe Democrat. That, of course, is states like Oregon and New Jersey. The only reason they're not safe is I do believe in a best-case scenario, if Trump is really winning the popular vote by 2, 3, 4 points, both of these states barely fall within 10 points, right? Just barely, but I do think it's enough for New Jersey and Oregon to be within 10 points. And New Jersey, with how trends are looking in New York, I mean, is it really crazy to say New Jersey could be within 10? If Trump is really doing so much better in, say, New York, why would he do much better in New Jersey? So, either way, these two states, they're borderline safe, but they're technically within 10 points. Now, let's finish off the rest of the states, and let's start with the state of Nevada. I do think right now Trump is going to win Nevada by a couple points as of now. The early voting looks so bad for Democrats there that I don't think Harris is going to win it anyways. But in a best case scenario, and this may seem like a hot take, I really believe that Trump would win Nevada by over 5 points. And I know that sounds crazy, but with how bad the early voting looks in Nevada right now, in a best case scenario for Trump, it could be even worse for Democrats. And I already think it's DEFCON 1 for them there. If it gets even worse for them, yeah, you're probably talking about Trump plus 5, Trump plus 6. Same thing in Arizona, which again, this is not an official prediction. But with how bad the early voting looks for Democrats in Nevada and Arizona right now, in a best case scenario, Trump is probably going to win both of these states by at a bare minimum 5 to 6 points. And you can probably already tell where things are going right off the bat. I mean, if she's losing Arizona and Nevada by 5 to 6 points, what do you think's happening in Georgia and North Carolina? Probably the same thing. I mean, North Carolina early voting, just like Arizona, just like Nevada, looks like a complete and utter disaster for the Democrat Party. They are getting crushed in North Carolina right now. For crying out loud, independents are outvoting Democrats in North Carolina. That's not a misquote. Democrats getting outvoted by independent voters, which that has never happened. Even back in 2022, where Republicans got killed in early voting, they still led independent voters. Right now, Democrats are third in the early vote. Same thing in Georgia. Now, obviously with Georgia, we don't have voter registration. But the demographics of these voters, they're Trump voters. These are rural Trump voters that they're voting. They're voting early. And even Fulton County, the areas that have the highest turnout compared to prior years are areas that are more 50-50. They're more Republican leaning. They're not downtown Atlanta that vote 95% Democrat. Those areas, they're having little to no turnout. They're getting crushed, even in Fulton County. Now, that doesn't mean Trump is going to win Fulton. It just means that the early voting in these states, they're just so bad right now that if it gets even worse for Democrats, like the stars align for Trump, the Sun Belt's just a complete bloodbath. Trump is winning Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina by likely to maybe safe margins. I know that sounds crazy, but with how bad early voting looks right now in all 4 of these states, a best case scenario, it's entirely possible. And with that, Trump just needs a single state. He could pick from any state. He could win Nebraska second. And he's the next president of the United States. But remember, this is a best case scenario. We haven't even touched states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, And already, Trump's at 268. And speaking of the Rust Belt, in a best case scenario, they would be lean to likely Republican. All three of these states. You can make an argument for likely, but for now, we'll just say, fine. With Michigan and Wisconsin, we don't know the early voting technically because they don't have voter registration. So we'll just say fine. It's like a 4 to 5 point victory in these three states for Trump. You could make it likely, but fine. To be nice to Democrats, we'll just say all three of these states are lean to likely. I mean, already this is DEFCON 1 for Democrats because they're not only getting killed in the Sun Belt, but even in the Rust Belt, they're getting crushed everywhere. But even then, by some miracle, this isn't even the worst news yet, because look at how many states are still up for grabs, and these are not usually swing states. These are lean to safe Democrat states that, in a best case scenario for Trump, he could possibly flip a couple of these. Now, I want to be clear that I still find it, even in a best case scenario, very unlikely for Trump to flip all of these states, let alone even one or two of them. But with how bad things are looking right now, and if things get even worse for Democrats, there's a legitimate possibility in a best case scenario. Trump could pick off a state like Minnesota, like Virginia, like even New Mexico or New Hampshire. Now, of all these states, the easiest for Harris to win is not actually a state, it's actually Nebraska second. I think in a best case scenario, she probably wins it by like 4 to 5 points, maybe by 6. I think that district is trending too far to the left, and even in the best case scenario, Harris should win the district by a couple of points at the bare minimum. It is Omaha. It's one of those districts that, with Kamala Harris, she should be able to win. But the fact that it may not even be a likely Democrat is not good for her whatsoever. This district, even in the current map, it should be likely to safe Democrats. That's how Democrat this district has gotten, but there's a chance that it could be within 5 points. Now, as for the other 5 states, I still think it's very unlikely for Trump to flip all 5 of them. I just think that some of these states, they're just too Democrat for Trump to win. But in a best case scenario, and like I said, this is the stars align, like everything goes perfectly the next month. If Trump has a very good week, the stars align, everything goes perfectly, Trump could actually flip a couple of these states. I know that sounds crazy because states like New Mexico, New Hampshire, Virginia, they voted for Harris by or Biden by 10 points back in 2020. You're talking about a pretty big shift from 2020. But in each of these states, especially Virginia, the early voting for Democrats looks like a complete disaster. And I really believe in a best case scenario, Trump would win Virginia. Not by a lot, but it would be very close. Like, I'm talking about within a half a point. But in a best case scenario, I really believe Trump would barely win Virginia. And same thing in Minnesota. Again, this is not my official prediction. People should understand that this is if the stars align. And if Trump is only down by 2 to 3 points right now in Virginia, in Minnesota, well, that's the margin of error. And he could actually pull off the upset in both of these states. Now, again, I'm not saying it's for sure going to happen, but it makes you really wonder. If Trump is within the margin of error, and hell, he's actually campaigning in Virginia now, well, maybe his campaign thinks they have a chance there. Now, as for New Mexico, I know there was a leaked poll a couple of days ago that Harris +3 or whatever, which I have questions about, but in a best case scenario, I think New Mexico could be within 5. Now, I know that sounds crazy to say, but if Trump is really doing this much better with Hispanic voters, and I know with New Mexico you do got a lot of white liberals that vote heavy Democrat, I get that. But if Trump is doing so much better with Hispanic voters and Harris is just falling off the map, it could be within 5 points. And as for New Hampshire and Maine, I could see an argument for both of them, especially Maine. Maine's one of those states, demographically speaking, should be very friendly to Trump. But there are big question marks surrounding the Northeast, okay, will Trump really be doing this much better in places like New Hampshire or Maine? And New Hampshire is much more tricky than Maine for Trump to win, just because you have a bunch of people from Boston moving into the state. But I would say right now, in a best case scenario, they would probably be pure toss-ups. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but if I'm being honest, you could go either way with them. Like, states like Minnesota and Virginia, the reason I think they are tilting Republican is just the simple fact that right now, even the current polling, it suggests the race is going to be, relatively speaking, competitive. And the early voting in both states don't look good for Democrats right now. And if Trump is really doing this much better in the popular vote, well, in both these states, it should be enough for Trump to barely squeak by. But New Hampshire and Maine, there are big questions as to will these states, especially Maine, will they trend Republican? Is Maine really going to be one of those states that Republicans could win in the future? Or was 2016 just a complete fluke? Or was 2020 a fluke? We will see what happens in a week or so, but in a best case scenario, this would be the map right now. Now, I could see some states flipping, Virginia and Minnesota. Maybe it's a fluke. Maybe Democrats are going to win these states either way, which, okay, fine, that's reasonable to say. But you could interchange Minnesota or Virginia. And even then, if this is the map, well, Democrats are in deep trouble. If this is the best case scenario for Trump, they're getting crushed in the Senate, they're getting crushed in the House, and they're defending a bunch of states that they should not be defending. They should be making plays for Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, not defending Minnesota and Virginia. But we'll see what happens in a week, and if this is really the map, like the best case scenario actually happens, if Democrats are in deep, deep, deep trouble. But anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.